Welcome, everyone, to the Seattle Sports Union podcast. This is Matt Page, the delightful duck, this week. Back with Brian, the Soul Man Solak, and today we have another special guest, the legendary Seattle Times reporter, Steve Kelley. Yes, he's a legend. Yes, you are. We're happy to have you here, Steve. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I love your show. I can't believe you got Jeff Smulyan. That was a great get.
We appreciate that. I was going to ask you about him later, what your thoughts were about him, but let's go ahead and ask you your thoughts on Jeff Smulyan.
Want to start with that?
Yes, please.
I never thought we'd start with Jeff Smulyan. I really liked him up until that moment, when we found out that he didn't have two dimes to rub together and he was trying to run a major league team. And then he was trying to sell a major league team and sneak his way to Tampa, which in hindsight is about the dumbest thing you could have ever done, because look at their attendance, I mean,
the stadium.
Yeah. And he lied about all that. So as a guy to hang out with, when he's like probably the best owner I've ever dealt with from a let's hang out standpoint. But they're just he was leveraged up to the bill of his Mariners cap, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah. Well, I want to veer back to where we were hoping to start, at least. Start back at the beginning of your career. And what brought you over to the Pacific Northwest from Delaware, right? It was Delaware you were from?
Yeah, I was from Wilmington.
Okay.
It's a long, convoluted story, but we got 50 minutes, right? So we're good.
Yes, we do.
Oh, we're curious. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I was born in a log cabin. That's not true. I went to the University of Delaware, got my first newspaper job at the York Dispatch, a horrible, horrible paper in York, Pennsylvania. I was there for a year. I didn't learn anything. I didn't have any clips that I could send out. I was if I had stayed there, excuse me, if I had stayed there, I'd still be there.
Oh.
I mean, there was no way in, no way out.
Yeah.
And so after a year, I just decided I got to get out of here. And I also felt like I needed to kick myself in the butt and get me going, get my career really going. So so I went back to Wilmington, Delaware, and I was working as a repairman for Sears, which, all good journalists should do that for a while. And I repaired washers and dryers and put up this thing called TV antennas, and just a bunch of crazy stuff like that. All the while kind of looking at where am I going to go. And I read a poem about Lake Chelan that was written by William Stafford, and I thought it was Lake Chelan. I had no idea where it was or what it was, but I love that poem. And William Stafford was a professor at Lewis and Clark College down in Portland, and I just decided to pack up my MG and head for Chelan. Before I left, I sent letters to every newspaper in Washington. And I was so dumb and naive, I got like stacks of rejection letters, or, we'll put your name in our, right at the top of our list. There was no list. So I drove out here, and, I was still cocky enough to think that when I went over the Idaho line into Washington, all the sports editors would be gathered there, flagging me down and saying, hey. So that didn't happen. I went to Chelan, was driving a forklift at an apple shed. Again, another perfect move for being a journalist. And on my days off, I would drive to the Wenatchee World. I set up an interview with the Longview Daily News, and the guy stiffed me. I drove from Chelan to Longview, got there, and well, you're not on his calendar. So this guy, Ted Nat, I'll never forget the name. And so on my way back to Chelan, I went through Seattle, and I decided I was going to stop. This can't be done today. And this is how lucky I was. But I stopped at the Seattle Times, walked up the stairs to the managing editor's office, knocked on the door. come on in. Who are you? I'm a forklift driver in Chelan. And I want to be, I want to be a sports writer. And so we talked for like an hour. His name was Jim King, just a great, great human being. And anybody who worked for him would say the same thing. And he said, look, you can't work for the Seattle Times. You don't have any experience, but I guarantee you, this was right around Thanksgiving. He said, by Thanksgiving, you'll have a job. So I went back to Chelan, hopped on the forklift, and got a call from the Centralia Daily Chronicle. And for the next year and a half, that's where I went. And on my day, again, on my days off, I would go to Portland for the Trailblazers, came up here for the Sonics. The Mariners weren't here yet. And I just kind of watched, and actually I was a pain in the neck to the sports writers, but how do you do that? Or, just kind of like a little kid brother holding on to the older brother's leg and take me with you, take me with you. It was great to me. Everybody was so good to me. And I went from Centralia to Olympia, from Olympia to Portland, and that's kind of where I got my big break. I got to cover the Trailblazers there for 3 years, right after their championship. So they're going downhill, which is great for a journalist because there was all kinds of news breaking. Maurice Lucas wanted to be traded. Lionel Hollins wanted to be traded. Bill Walton couldn't play because of his leg, and they were accusing him of being a malingerer. I mean, the guy has since had his ankles fused, his back fused. I mean, he's almost died on the table during one of his back surgeries, and he was a malingerer. Nobody wanted to play basketball better than Bill Walton, or have more passionately than Bill Walton. And he never, he those couple like 78, 79, 79, 80, he couldn't play basketball, and it was torturing him. But I got to do that. David Halberstam, noted Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, decided he was going to do a book on the collapse of the Trailblazers. And so he became like my grad school. I followed another thing. I followed him all around, million questions. He invited me into all of his interviews, and we became friends for the rest of his life. And he would call me, he had the voice of God, and he would call me every once in a while and call me Kelso. He'd say, Kelso, I read your column today. You weren't very good today. Like, oh no. David Halberstam's telling me that. But he had all kinds of great advice. And, I came up here and covered the Sonics for a year. And David was, for the next 31 years, David was always in my ear, either literally or, well, not literally, but either in person or just me thinking about him. So that's the story.
I got to ask, do you have a favorite Bill Walton story then to share?
I have 1,000 of them. Most of them I don't want to.
Okay.
I'd rather not,
Public,
say. But when you know how he goes on and on and on about the most ridiculous stuff. You know how Bill just gets incredibly verbose and on his own cloud a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I retired, he left me a message that went on and on and on about thanks for your dedication. Thanks for your, I thought I was talking to Gandhi, and he got mixed up. He got the wrong number.
Okay.
And, he ended by saying, "You will remain my potted plant." Now you tell me what that means. I have no idea.
Yeah,
but we had a lot of great times. And the first time I met him, I met him down in Newport Beach when he wasn't playing and when he was sort of public enemy number one in Portland. And he ordered about $75 worth of food. And, even then he was making pretty good money, and it just kept coming and coming. I'm trying to interview him, and he's got a sandwich in his mouth and soup, smoothing some soup in there. And that was kind of part of our relationship is, okay, you gonna take me out to lunch? Bill Walton, he's making whatever he's making, and I'm making making like 20 cents an hour.
Yeah.
But I dutifully did whatever he asked.
Oh, that's awesome. Moving on, I know you covered all sports with Seattle Times, but I'm gonna 1993. You came out with a Mariners article with the infamous Ducky Ponds. I have to ask about Ducky Ponds. Will you tell our listeners the story behind Ducky Ponds? I mean, my father and myself, that was the articles we loved to read from you when he was part of your weekly article whenever you had him on. I mean, please share. I mean, tell Matt's the young one of our team here. Tell us about Ducky Ponds. I mean, how is he doing?
Well, he died. My managing editor killed him.
Oh,
I'll start from the last day.
Okay.
He called me into his office and he said, we don't like, I had a guy named Jim Rat for basketball.
Yeah.
And Ducky Ponds for baseball.
That's right.
And he said, we don't like using fictitious characters in the paper. And I said to him, perfectly understandable. But the next time that talking cat, we ran Garfield. But the next time that talking cat comes to the office, can I talk to him? I'd love to talk to him. So, I mean, just trying to point out to him how stupid it was. The reader doesn't understand that. They think that these guys are real guys, and like, no, they don't. So that was the end of both of them. But I grew up in Wilmington. There was a columnist named Al Cartwright who he had a character. He did reviews of every Delaware football game. University of Delaware football game, and and their colors were blue and gold. And this guy was named Blue Wind Gold, and he had seen every game that Delaware had ever played, and so he was the Monday Monday morning quarterback.
Okay.
For Al Cartwright, and I always love those columns. So I've been thinking for a long time. It's for me, these guys, Ducky Ponds, Jim Rat, are a great way to say what you feel a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, I mean, to me, both of those guys were the alter ego of Seattle sports fans. A lot of people, could think of themselves as Jim Rat. A lot of guys could think of themselves as Ducky Ponds. And that's why I think people related to those guys. I love doing those columns. The guys on the desk at our paper loved reading them. The only guy didn't like it was the managing editor because it confused him a little bit. So anyway, so I can say all this now because I'm retired, but I loved it. And I could really get under somebody's skin, like Tom Chambers. After I did after I did a Jim Rat column, came up to me and said, just lit into me. And I said, hey, it wasn't me, it was Jim. You can't get mad at me. And that really set him off. And you know what? I don't blame him. I'd have been mad too.
I appreciate you sharing that. Seriously. I told my dad and mom came over last night for dinner, and I told them we were talking with you tonight, and he says, make sure you ask Steve Kelley about Ducky Ponds. He's our favorite character.
Well, every time I see Harold Reynolds, that's Ducky.
Nice.
That's great. So over the course of your career, do you have a favorite interview? Like your number one that always sticks out in your mind is your favorite one?
Okay, I have to think about this there's different kinds of favorite.
True.
Yeah.
There's guys like Maurice Lucas, who it was like a half hour of hand-to-hand combat. And but it was great. In the end, it was really good. And he would say things to me. I mean, he had hands like catcher's mitts. And he would say, if you don't get off my case, I'm going to give you one of these. And I was thinking, well, if I live, I'm going to be a very wealthy man. But he was great. And it was fun jousting with him. A lot of coaches. I mean, George Carl, another guy, it was like a fencing match. But, he loved basketball. I love basketball. And I loved talking basketball with him. And I hate to say this, but I liked getting under his skin, which wasn't hard. He's a very sensitive guy, and I love him to this day. But he'd get a little tired of my act, I think. Mike Holmgren, just a great, great human being. Lou Piniella, you had to tread carefully, kind of be very cautious. But I think for me, the most important thing was being there. If I criticized some guy, I would be in the locker room the next day and I would, look for him. I'm not going to go up to him and say, "Do you like me? You still like me?" But if he wants to, if the player wants to light into me, I'm there. And I think that really helped me in the long run to get good interviews. The guys I like, besides the guys that I could kind of joust with, are just guys who were dead honest with you. Steve Largent was one, and Steve Largent would call me. Well, here, two stories. Dave Craig, when he first started, he would call me up after an interview and at home and say, did I give you enough? Do you want, do you need something else?
Oh,
I mean, can you imagine, like Russell Wilson, if he said hello to you, it was a big, but Largent was a guy who would call me, say on a Monday after I wrote my column on the Sunday game, and tell me what he thinks I did wrong or my opinion was wrong. And he wasn't like yelling at me, he was educating me. And I appreciated that. And there were also guys like Kurt Warner who was really rough on me. And he's a great running back. I'm just a sports writer, so he'll win that argument every time.
yeah.
And I had some guys say, how many home runs did you ever hit? How many 20-point games did you ever have? I did have one in 8th grade, by the way, but that didn't seem to influence them at all. But a lot of coaches, I didn't get to know Pete that well because Pete kind of keeps you at arm's length. But Don James, Lorenzo Romar, there's a lot of guys like Lorenzo and George Carl and Mike Holmgren who wanted you. Jack Ramsey with the Trailblazers,
Okay.
#1 educator of sports writers, and he would bring me in and diagram plays and say, when I have my fist in the air, this is what we're going to run. So the next time you tell me they ran a stupid play, I called the right play. They're stupid, not me. But as much as I like those guys, I just like the guys that I like talking to. Mike Cameron, just a great guy.
Okay.
Harold Reynolds, great guy. Jay Buhner, believe it or not, a tough guy, a sweetheart. Dan Wilson. That 95 team was loaded with good guys.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a correlation there.
Yeah. Good team. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you have we asked for the favorite interview? Do you ever have one specific interview that really went way off the rails and just disastrous?
Most of them, I think, but let me think. Well, there were guys that I didn't know, like spring training. A lot of guys I don't know, and I'm thinking he's going to be a good interview. And John Olerud, when they got John Olerud, I didn't know much about him. Certainly, I didn't know much about the way he dealt with the media. But when he played in New York, he lived in Manhattan. I thought, well, that's pretty cool. He wanted to get to know the city. So I just sat down with him one day in spring training and thought, this is going to be really interesting. He was the most boring human being I've ever talked to, and apologized for that. It's like, this is me, I'm trying my best, but this is all you're going to get. So for me, I don't remember one where, well, I remember one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it looks like you remember one.
Okay. Wait a minute. Here's a, we should have done this ahead of time. I could have a notebook full. I have my notebook, but I don't have any. I don't have as much in as I could. Phil Bradley for the
Okay.
See, I go way back, so
Yeah.
I'm mentioning names that people are like Phil Bradley. But anyway, for first couple of years he was with the Mariners, he was a 300 hitter, very good fielder, just a great athlete. And then all of a sudden something happened, and um, it became very difficult for me to talk to him. But so we did an interview, and he just intentionally gave me one word answers. And so finally I said something to him like, well, what happened in the seventh inning when the line drive down the left field line and you just sort of ho-hummed after the ball? Ho-hummed? What are you talking about ho-hummed?
Oh.
On and on and on. And so the next day, it's a Sunday afternoon, Sunday morning, really, at that point. And he says, I want to talk to you after the game. And it's sort of like the school bully saying, I'll meet you behind the church after school, And so the whole game, I'm waiting for the game to end so I can, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So he grabs me and he says, let's go in there. So he went in the training room and he locked the door. And he pulled the blinds down.
Oh.
And he's got a bat in his hand. And he's kind of smacking the bat, and he's really livid about this ho-hum thing. And I'd written a column that appeared that morning after we had the kind of blowout on Saturday. And I don't know, he just lit into me. And at the end, he finally said, well, just write all that stuff. Just go ahead and write whatever you want. And I said to him, that was kind of the plan all along, but I appreciate your good graces on that. He opens the door, and this is the God's honest truth. Like 4 Mariners tumbled into the training room. They were like leaning on the door, listening to the whole thing. And I think they were, I think they would have given me a standing ovation if Phil hadn't been there, but it was interesting. But yeah, some of these things, like with Phil, like with Maurice, can go on for like a year,
Yeah.
And a couple of times when Lucas told me he didn't want to talk to me, I go, thank the Lord, I don't have to deal with him for a while. But you know what? And again, we became friends after he retired, and when he was an assistant coach, we came up here and played, and we were pretty close then. And then he was assistant coach for Nate McMillan down in Portland. We became really good friends. And I was going to say something else about that, but I can't remember. I'm 74. You know what I mean? Things don't come to me as quickly.
You wrote a column, I don't remember exactly when, but you stated that John
Me
Wetland.
neither. Oh, I'm sorry.
You stated that former Yankees reliever John Wetland saved baseball in Seattle. Do you truly believe that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he served up the pitch that saved baseball in Seattle. So yeah, I guess I do believe that. And again, it's what the Kraken are doing right now.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the nervous days when we thought the Mariners were going to leave and go to Tampa, the nervous days before Ken Behring was going to move the team to LA, the Seahawks, and Paul Allen rescued him with that crazy election. We've had to have 2 elections to keep our baseball team, one to keep our football team. And then the agony over the Sonics leaving. And I remember during the give and take in the city council, Nick Licata, one of the city councilmen, said sports don't provide any cultural benefit to the city.
Oh.
Yeah. Think about that.
Ooh.
And
couldn't be more wrong.
If he was here right now, and if he was here during the Seahawks 2 Super Bowl runs, he was here in '95. That didn't seem to have any effect on him.
Yeah.
But you can't tell me that right now, people that weren't hockey fans 2 weeks ago are talking about it now, and they're into it and they're excited about it. And even after I went to game 6, I sold a kidney and was able to buy a ticket. And so
How'd
that
that
worked
work
out
out?
really well.
I was gonna say, how'd that work out?
Well, I'm still a little sore, but
Okay.
I got to see the game. But it was a horrible game.
Yeah.
And I thought the Kraken kind of got bullied that game. But it was still, people were so excited about the chance to be there, the chance that there's going to be a game 7 on TV. Um, I remember being in Portland when Damian Lillard hit the 3 that sent Oklahoma City home and sent the Blazers to the next round. And I was downtown after the game, and it's just a party. And the bartenders are making a lot of money, the restaurants are making a lot of money, and people are talking and people are getting unified. And you can't tell me that's not a cultural advantage.
Excellent point.
Absolutely.
One last question about before you retired. 2008, 2009, every team in the state of Washington pretty much sucked. How was it as a sports writer for you? I mean, seriously, how was it writing? I mean, that had been tough.
It was very easy. I just changed some of the names and the final score maybe or something like that. It was awful.
Yeah.
And there've been, when the Huskies, not that long ago, the last year, Tyrone Willingham, when they didn't win a game, and you run out of things to say. Yeah, they were bad last week. They were worse this week. And Tyrone was no help at all to us. And really, he was just interested in kind of promoting his brand. And I think that was part of his problem here. I don't think he ever related to the players, and he had no sympathy for the players. I mean, that season was horrible for everybody. But the seasons you're talking about, yeah, it's like, for me, it's like, hey, is anybody out there? Are you still reading this stuff? If you are, why? I'm running out of things to say. But we all laughed about it, sitting with Art Teal at the games, and we'd say to one another, "Why don't you just write this one in and give it to our paper too?" Vice versa. Just save some energy.
I'll take this game. You take the next one. It'll be the same anyway.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Moving on, we did want to ask your thoughts on the Kraken. Brian and I are fairly new to hockey. I mean, I personally, I go to Silvertips games all the time and live here in Everett, and I'm still learning some things here in the second year of the Kraken, but it's been a lot of fun, definitely. What do you think about the process for the team? And I know they've kind of stumbled out of the gate. We talked to Brian. I'm having one of those moments again.
Jeff Baker.
Yeah. Why am I forgetting Jeff? Jeff is a wonderful person. Jeff, talk to Jeff about it.
Who are you talking about?
Jeff Baker?
I'm kidding.
Okay, good.
He does a great job.
Really he does an excellent job. And we talked to him a while back about his thoughts regarding the kind of stutter out of the gate in terms of the team connecting with the city. Part of that was the media deal, maybe some promotional things and all that. I mean, and the prices for the games the first season were pretty outlandish.
To me, that's the killer.
Yeah.
You're trying to embrace a city and then saying, well, if you come to one game, you'll be lucky. And it just seemed kind of that part of the marketing of the Kraken was a little elitist, I thought. And I think that turned a lot of people off, especially in this town. And let's face it, I think every town's a front runner town. But I think Seattle might be a little more than most. So you come out with $250 tickets to see the Kraken in San Jose in April. I mean, that's pretty low. That's low entertainment right there. But in hindsight, they did it exactly the right way, except for the ticket price. They could have sold it a little more like, okay, it's gonna be a rough year. We got all these guys who have never played together. We don't have any cohesion getting started. And we're just not going to be very good. They put so much pressure on Grubauer
Yeah.
to be the Magic Man, and I'm pretty sure it wore on him. But in hindsight, if you're building a franchise, first of all, cut the ticket. Well, you can't cut the ticket prices because you sold all the tickets before you ever played a game, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so from that standpoint, they're very smart, but they kind of priced the average fan out of the arena. Um, so it took something like this in the second year. But they have that expression, "fear the deep." I think
Mhm.
that's one of their expressions. Well, that's exactly should be their motto now, because they may not have any superstars, but they're deep. They have four good lines. They have great defense, and now that Grubauer is standing on his head every night and doing a great job.
Oh yeah.
And so if they had marketed it like, we're going to take our lumps this year, but we're going to grow. We have a lot of good players. We don't have any great players yet. Maybe this year, maybe Matty Beniers is going to become that. Um, but they sure have a lot of good players.
Mm.
And I think that showed in the Avalanche series. They were way deeper than the Avalanche, and the Avalanche couldn't survive the injuries that it had.
Mhm.
The Kraken lose their best scorer, their 40 goal scorer, and they didn't miss a beat.
It's next man up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's so easy to say.
It
But if you're the
is.
next man and you can't play, I don't care. I don't care if you're up or not.
Yeah.
And we finally saw that, I think, with the Seahawks a couple years ago. The next man up wasn't Cam Chancellor. Uh, he wasn't Doug Baldwin, and it was a big drop, and it's taken some time to rebuild. But I think from a personnel standpoint, they're almost a role model for how to build a franchise. Golden Knights weren't bad either. They got to the finals the first year, but I think for sustainability and for a culture for a team, this was the right move to do what they've done. I grew up, I grew up in Wilmington and Philadelphia, and I was a Flyers fan, and we didn't like Dave Haxtell when he was the Flyers coach, and we were happy to see him go. When the Kraken announced that he was going to be the coach, it's like, oh no, I've already lived through this nightmare. And and it turns out he was the right guy. Um, and I think he's handled the young guys well. I mean, I kind of got a little frustrated last year. Just throw Matty in. Every shift you can, give him experience. And I thought he kind of played it a little tight to the vest with Beniers, but he's pushed all the right buttons. And when you have that many kind of equally talented guys, and you can keep them all happy, and you can watch them grow, I think I don't know, but I think you have to ask Jeff this, but I think their player development core has been really good. And um, I wrote his name down just so I wouldn't forget, and now I can't find it. Oh, Cartaya comes up and scores in his first game. He's the most valuable player
Yeah.
in the minor leagues.
Mhm.
Maybe he's going to be a guy.
Mm.
And now they have all these really solid veterans around these guys to kind of mentor them. It's a super success story. Jeff's going to have to write another book this year. And, yeah, and I
Yes.
guarantee you it'll be a better seller than the first one because they're winning now.
Oh.
Not to say that this one wasn't.
Oh,
I know.
it's a good book. Yeah, I have a
Very
copy
good book.
myself.
Can we classify Seattle as a hockey town now, or is it too early?
Oh no, it's
Or
way
were
too
we
early.
always one?
Right now it's
Yeah.
a hey, we're in the playoffs town.
Okay.
And I think they have this professional ultimate frisbee
Yeah.
thing now. It's a thing, I think.
Yeah, it
And
is.
if they go undefeated, there'll probably be 12,000 people at Memorial Stadium. Um, this is a give me a winner town right now, and especially give me a winner this time of year.
Yeah.
The thing about going to the game on Friday night, Game 6, it was a beautiful day, tons of people flocking to Climate Pledge. It reminded me so much of Game 5 on a Saturday afternoon against the Nuggets. similar ending too, except that game ended this Sonic season.
Yeah.
Before Game 7 against Utah, when the Sonic, that one of the best basketball games I've ever seen. And it was the same thing. Nice day. People, there's just this huge sense of anticipation. And it was such a familiar feeling for me, just walking around the Seattle Center before the game. It's like, this is what it's supposed to be like in the spring. We got a pro team in the playoffs. Everybody's talking about them. Everybody all of a sudden is an expert, even though they don't know what icing is. I mean,
Yeah.
and they don't care. All they, and they do care, and they do know that, I think, for the most part. But when the whistle blows and the action stops, something happened. Puck didn't go in the net, so don't worry about it. They're going to drop the puck somewhere, and that's the great thing about hockey. The goal, if the puck goes in the net, that's a point.
Yep.
So it's
Pretty straightforward.
And,
Yeah.
offside and icing and all that. You'll get the hang of it pretty soon.
Yeah.
It's not cricket.
Yeah.
Which
No,
I still don't understand. I'd love to. I wish I could go to a game with some of my Australian or Indian friends and have them teach me the game.
I've tried. I will never be able to decipher cricket. I don't know.
Well, if you're in England and you got the sports report on TV,
Yeah.
and they're telling you what happened at a cricket game, they could be speaking any language and it would be the end of it. But I want to learn. I really do want to learn.
You brought up Game 7 of the 96 Sonics just a moment ago. So that brings up, you wrote one of your last articles, it might have been your last article, but the top 30 moments of your career. And number one, you talked about Usain Bolt. Why did you pick Bolt for your number one moment of all time?
Well, yeah, a couple of my friends said, you picked 2 track and field moments.
You
Come
did.
on. But for me, it was, these were all like personal feelings.
Okay.
And Usain Bolt, I was right at the finish line in Beijing, about 10 rows up in the stands. And he's just smoking the field in the 100-meter dash. And he's celebrating about 5 meters from the finish line. And my first thought was, just to watch him run is thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
He's way bigger, lankier than most sprinters, and it's an incredible thing to watch. It's breathtaking. But then he's showboating across he's Dylan Brooks going across the finish line, and you just blew it. You had the world record and you blew it. And then you look up on the scoreboard and he didn't blow it. He got it. And he showboated his way through the end of that race. So that really captured me. And the other one was Michael Johnson breaking the world record in the 96 Olympics in Atlanta. And again, it was like coming around the turn in the 200 meters and just finding some gear that no human being had ever found before.
Yeah.
And that was another one of these just jaw-dropping moments. But I understand other people. If you're a Seattle fan, you want to hear every great moment that the fans have experienced. But this was more about things that I experienced.
Fair enough.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't let you go. We're running. We got about 10 minutes left or so. I can't let you go without asking about the Seahawks and what your thoughts are regarding our latest draft that we just had recently.
Well, my feelings are just, my feelings are, I don't really know these guys. All I'm judging on is the same numbers that everybody else has. It's not really that mysterious. At least I don't think so. But Witherspoon, the cornerback, everybody universally thinks that was a great pick. And it was the 5th pick in the draft. It better be good.
Yeah.
But now with Woolen on the other side, that could be they have the makings for another Legion of Boom. I think.
They do. Definitely.
And that's fantastic. The wide receiver from Ohio State, they needed another receiver, and now that's a pretty good lineup there. I still think Tyler Lockett's one of the most underrated receivers in football, and I don't know why. He catches everything. I mean, he catches everything.
He does.
And you know, I think the year that he got hurt really killed that team. But thinking about Witherspoon 2 years ago, watching the Seahawks, it was just so. I mean, it became like Groundhog Day, where every week all you could see are the other team's receivers running wild in the middle of the field. It's like didn't matter what uniform was. It didn't.
Yep.
It didn't matter whether he was the third slot or 10-time Pro Bowler. They were wide open, and it's not going to happen nearly as much now. And yeah, I think there's a lot. There's first of all, there's a lot of Seahawk fans in this state, and they're ready to fast forward to September now, I think. But I mean, just in general, um, they've recovered pretty well from a couple of really bad drafts,
Mhm.
and they all have bad drafts. Howie Roseman is now the hero of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And he's put together two great teams, and he made every right move each of the last two drafts. 5 years ago, they wanted to run the guy out of town. Well, actually, they did. When Chip Kelly took over,
Yeah.
Chip ran him out of town.
Yeah.
But he's a hero. They're thinking about that at top of City Hall, William Penn. They have William Penn there.
Yeah.
Big statue of William Penn. I think they're going to put Howie Roseman up there instead. That's City Council's talking that over right now.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think many people in Philadelphia would be upset about that.
No, not really.
Until they start losing, and then it's be like, "Where's William Penn?"
Then a mob will rush City Hall and tear down the statue.
Yeah, that's right.
So do you think the Seahawks should have drafted a quarterback this year, or were we going to be okay?
Well, I mean, that's part of the problem with being a GM.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have. Geno Smith had an incredible year. I mean, his numbers are through the roof, and because it was Geno Smith, it was like, holy cow, where did this guy come from? How could so many people have been wrong about him?
Yeah.
But this was 1 year.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, they always talk about the sophomore jinx in baseball, which I think Julio Rodriguez is going through a little of that right now. But I think he'll be fine. But that's what you have to wonder if Geno has that kind of year in him again. And I kind of think he has to have that kind of year. Again, getting another wide receiver, another weapon for him helps.
Another running back or two, actually.
Yeah, exactly. All of that with another year under the offensive line's belt, I think that's going to be a big plus. So yeah, again, there's a lot of people saying let's kick it off. Let's get going.
Right on.
I've seen you guys kind of comment a lot on the Sea Dragons.
Oh.
And I couldn't name one player on that team. I just haven't watched them, and
Okay.
that's on me. That's my bad. But it's just, first of all, I'm a basketball guy, and this is basketball season.
True.
And if there's an XFL game on TV or ACC game or an NBA game, I'm going to go ACC or NBA. And I just haven't been able to get into it. I've been, really impressed with the crowd numbers. I mean, considering like opening night, what was it, like 22 degrees?
Yeah, it was really cold.
Really cold out there. I mean, that says a lot about the hunger of the city for football.
Absolutely.
And I like Randy Mueller. He sort of put this team together. They had a good coaching staff. I feel really bad about it now. Next year, I'm going to be a season ticket holder next year.
All right,
and I bet
that's
tickets
good.
aren't $300 a piece either.
Well, we'll hold you to it. We had Jordan Veazey, the wide receiver, number 88, on the show actually earlier this weekend. Before the game, unfortunately, that they weren't able to win. But he was a delight to chat with, and we had Randy on the show, Randy Miller on the show. We loved talking with him. They really put together an interesting group of guys, really talented, great coaching staff. It was fun to watch. It really was.
Yeah. And I
And
think it's going to be better next year.
yeah,
And
oh yeah,
I mean, I'm joking about them a little bit, but it's great for the players.
it is.
It's another chance for them to show what they can do. Um, I guarantee you, the NFL people watched all those games
Oh yeah,
and you know,
oh,
circled about 25 or 30 names that they'd be interested in. So yeah, it's there's there's nothing wrong with it. I just
no,
I don't have the bandwidth, I guess,
yeah.
to use a phrase I hate. Um,
But
but
they've been focusing on that in the promote. You watch a promotional video, and then whenever the game starts, they have their the 15 to 30-second clip of everyone's really ready and lacing up the boots and all that kind of stuff. And they talk about it's your chance, it's another chance for these players, and they really played that up. And the coaching staff as like we heard stories about Randy going in the locker room and giving the speech that the players need to hear from Jordan. And I've never heard of a GM doing that ever before. Also, on the other hand, the league is ending here, in another 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's ending right around the time that the draft is done with the NFL, and they're signing undrafted guys. So they're probably going to add a bunch of XFL players to those camp invites as well. So it's wonderful to see, and it's great to see Seattle embracing them.
Well, I go to Aqua Sox games occasionally.
Oh, you have to hit us up. We're season ticket holders.
And we write for their program too.
Yeah.
What's your phone number? I'll give you a call. No, I mean, I go to those games and I like them. And it's fun to see Julio Rodriguez there. And then 2 years later, he's winning the Rookie of the Year.
Yep.
And there's a couple guys, the catcher for the Aqua Sox now.
Harry Ford.
Yeah. I'm anxious to see him. There's a couple of pitchers who names I've written down somewhere, but when I like going to a game and having an idea of who I want to see, and then 2, 3, 4 years later saying, I remember that guy. I got to see him before he was who he is now.
Keep an eye on Jonathan Classe. He plays center field, and he's won 2 consecutive Players of the Week for the Northwest League. He's a speed devil on the base path. He's on pace for like 140 steals. It's insane.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
He might be one of the guys I've written down.
He's a lot of fun to watch.
I usually wait till it's about 70 degrees before I go.
Okay.
Yeah. It's still going to be 40 at night.
Yeah, we've been freezing. We've been freezing these last 2 homestands.
I bet. Yeah. What have the crowds been like?
Not as
pretty
big.
small for April.
2,000 for opening night, which was about half what they fill there. So
we're still getting used to it being a full season team now.
Yeah.
I think, and a lot of people don't realize that they're playing games in April. So it also, the marine layer comes in after the sun goes down. It gets cold, real cold.
Well, they're going to build a dome stadium, so that'll.
Yeah,
that sounds. They're talking about a stadium, aren't they?
They are, yes. Yeah. There's a couple spots in Everett, so hopefully it happens. And then tomorrow night starter for the Mariners, Bryce Miller. They just called up. We got to interview him last year with the Aqua Sox.
Yeah, I saw that you had talked to him. He's pitching tomorrow night.
He's pitching
tomorrow night. The Mariners. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Son of a gun! I didn't see that.
They had him to 40-man roster and everything today. So
he's a good kid. Cool. He'll do well too. He was very impressive.
Well, how about McGee the other day?
He was impressive.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, that was nice. I bet he got hurt.
A perfect game in his first time out.
Yeah. Hopefully he can come back healthy. But
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've reached the time here, and time to close out the show. We usually like to close out with some shout outs. We'll throw it at Brian first.
Oh, it's always at me first. I get it.
Yeah, keep you on the spot. Keep you on your toes.
Wait, I gotta think about this.
Yeah, buy me some time.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to give a shout out to my parents. Came over last night, and they're getting up there in age, and I just want to say that I love you both, and I just appreciate all that you've done for me. And life's too short, man. So if you haven't talked to your parents lately, give them a call and go hang out with them. They're good people, and hopefully my kids will come hang out with me one of these days.
All right, Steve, how about you?
Well, in that same vein, I'd like to give a shout out to my son Mason, former quarterback at Stillwell High School, and former Times writer actually too, till he came to his senses. But I've been having so much fun with my son and his girlfriend Jen, and my almost 6-year-old grandson Apollo, who is just, everybody talks about how cool it is being a grandfather, and it's nothing like being a grandson, especially when you can give back to your son at the end of the night. But I love being around Apollo. He's a smart kid. He's full of life. Uh, he's a I saw his first T-ball game the other night, and at one point he's at shortstop and he turns and he's waving to the people out in left field who are walking their dogs. And I thought, yeah, that's good. He's acknowledging the crowd. That's showing some maturity.
Exactly.
Yeah. There you go.
But yeah, I love hanging out with those guys. My wife and I are just it's like a great time in our lives.
Nice.
All right. I'm gonna mention Johnson Class A again. 2 weeks in a row being player of the week for Northwest League. You're not gonna be long in Everett, unfortunately for me. But looking forward to seeing more and interviewing him hopefully later this week. And with that, I'm going to say thank you, everyone. Thanks to Steve for joining us. This has been the Seattle Sports Union podcast. You can find us on Spotify and Apple, iTunes, anywhere podcasts are found. This will be up on YouTube as well. And you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. And now you can watch us on Saturdays on Ocean Shores Television. Public broadcasting, which is great on Saturday mornings from 11 to noon. And with that, I will say go Seattle sports because we've talked about them all. And thanks for listening, folks.